I'm Hannah Parker, 32, and I've built a life most people would envy. My design studio in San Francisco's Mission District hums with clients, from scrappy tech startups to sleek luxury brands. My apartment, a cozy loft with a view of the city's foggy skyline, is filled with my sketches and awards. But beneath the polished surface, there's a wound that won't heal. My family treats me like I don't belong. For 3 years running, I've been shut out of our family's Lake Tahoe retreat, a tradition started by my grandparents, Beatrice and Robert, that once defined my childhood summers. Those summers were magic. I'd race down to the private dock at our family's sprawling lakefront property, the air sharp with pine and the water so clear you could see pebbles on the bottom. Grandpa Robert, with his calloused hands and kind eyes, saw the artist in me before I did. While my siblings played scavenger hunts or climbed trees, he'd set up an easel for me on the porch, teaching me to capture the way sunlight danced on the lake. "You've got a gift, Hannah," he'd say. "Don't let anyone dim it." But when he and Grandma passed away within months of each other, a piece of our family died too. Tahoe retreat, meant to be our sacred tradition, changed. My parents, Thomas and Margaret Parker, took over. Dad, a regional banking CEO with a handshake that closes deals, and Mom, his ever-supportive shadow, turned the retreat into a spectacle. What used to be lazy barbecues and stargazing became a networking extravaganza. The guest list ballooned, business associates, socialites, even friends of friends, while the warmth of those early years faded. I didn't fit into their vision. My choice to pursue art, to skip the business degree they'd mapped out for me, made me the odd one out. My siblings, Ethan, Olivia, Sophie, Nathan, Lucas, and Chloe, followed paths Dad approved: banking, law, medicine, teaching. Me? I was the dreamer, the disappointment. The first time I was excluded 3 years ago, I got a text from Mom. "Keeping it small this year, honey. Not enough space." I swallowed the hurt, told myself they needed a tight-knit family vibe. But then I saw the photos on Instagram, 60 people, cousins, colleagues, strangers, all laughing at Tahoe. Cheer, the same excuse, the same lie. This June, the text came again. "No room, love." Hours later, I was scrolling through Instagram when Nathan's post stopped me cold. A photo of the retreat's itinerary captioned, "Biggest year yet." I zoomed in. 118 confirmed guests. My heart sank. I counted names, all 6 siblings, their spouses, kids, aunts, uncles, even Dad's old college buddy. They'd rented 2 neighboring properties to fit everyone. Everyone but me. I sat on my couch, staring at the city lights, tears burning my eyes. It wasn't about space, it never was. They didn't want me there. The rejection stung like a fresh cut, but this time something shifted. I was done crying, done pretending it didn't hurt. I opened my laptop and searched for luxury rentals near Tahoe. That's when I found Emerald Bay Estate, a stunning property just 15 minutes from our family's place. An idea sparked. If my family wouldn't make room for me, I'd create my own space. I'd host a creative minds retreat for people who valued me, friends, colleagues, artists. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my worth. Where in the world are you listening from? I'd genuinely love to know, are you tuning in from the US, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else? Feel free to drop your country in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I sincerely recommend you do it right now. Because these aren't just ordinary stories, they're reflections on real-life experiences, kind that stay with you, challenge you, and maybe even change you. I thought inviting Sophie and Ethan to my Creative Minds retreat might mend something broken between us. Sophie, my pediatrician sister, had always shown a flicker of pride in my art, and Ethan, the golden child who followed Dad into banking, sometimes asked about my design projects with what felt like real interest. So I sent them each a digital invite, the kind I'd spent hours perfecting with a sleek logo and photos of Emerald Bay Estate's shimmering lake views. I hoped they'd see I was creating something special, maybe even join me. But I should have known better. Our family's loyalties run deep and not in my favor. 2 days later, Ethan texted me, "Your retreat sounds awesome, Hannah, but I mentioned it to Mom and Dad. They're pissed." My stomach knotted. "Course," he told them. Ethan's always been Dad's right-hand man, the son who could do no wrong. The night before my retreat, as I sat in my San Francisco loft surrounded by welcome basket supplies, handmade soaps, artisanal chocolates, journals embossed with my retreat's logo, my phone lit up with Dad's name. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. Thomas Parker, CEO of a regional banking chain, didn't call to chat. I answered, bracing myself. "Hannah, what the hell is this retreat nonsense?" His voice was a blade, sharp and cold, the kind he used to close deals or silence boardrooms. "You're sabotaging our family tradition, embarrassing me in front of my partners. Cancel it. Now." My heart pounded, but I held my ground. "Dad, I'm not sabotaging anything. You've shut me out of Tahoe for 3 years. You invited 118 people this time, rented extra houses, and still said there's no room for me. I'm done begging to be included." The line went silent, then erupted. "Ungrateful, that's what you are." Dad roared. "You and your little art hobby, while your siblings built real lives, Ethan in banking, Olivia with her surgeon husband, Nathan and Lucas as lawyers, Sophie as a doctor, Chloe teaching. You chose to play with paints." His words cut deeper than I expected, slicing through years of quiet resentment. I gripped my phone, my voice shaking but steady. "It's not a hobby, Dad. I run a business. I pay my bills, win awards, employ people. But you've never cared because I didn't follow your script. You've celebrated everyone but me, pushed me out of the family." I was practically shouting now, tears burning my eyes. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore." Dad's voice dropped to a chilling growl. "If you go through with this stunt, Hannah, you're done. You won't be a Parker anymore." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. Disown me? After all the years of trying to prove myself, that's what it came to? He hung up before I could respond. I sank onto my couch, the San Francisco skyline blurring through my tears. My loft, usually my sanctuary, felt suffocating. I pictured Emerald Bay, the retreat I'd poured my savings and heart into. Was it worth losing my family over? Then my phone buzzed. Mia, my best friend since art school, was calling. I spilled everything, my voice cracking. "Hannah," she said, fierce and unwavering, "your dad doesn't get to define you. This retreat is your truth. Don't let him take it." Later, I FaceTimed Evelyn, my mentor, who pushed her red glasses up and leaned into the camera. "Your worth isn't in their approval, Hannah. You're building something they can't touch. Keep going." Their words pulled me back from the edge. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and looked at the retreat itinerary on my laptop. 22 people, friends, colleagues, Sophie, believed in me enough to show up. Dad's threat was a wound, but it wasn't my end. I'd turned this pain into something extraordinary. Through Dad's ultimatum, I threw myself into making the Creative Minds retreat undeniable. I drained most of my savings to secure Emerald Bay Estate, a modern masterpiece perched on Lake Tahoe's shore, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the lake's turquoise expanse and a private dock that seemed to float on glass. Price tag made me wince, money I'd earmarked for a condo down payment, but this felt bigger. If my family wouldn't make space for me, I'd build my own, a place where I belonged. I partnered with Lauren, a friend and event planner whose knack for logistics was matched only by her enthusiasm for my vision. Over late-night coffee at my San Francisco loft, we mapped out every detail. Sunrise yoga on the deck, pottery workshops in the garden, boat tours on the lake, and farm-to-table dinners under string lights. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a statement. I curated a guest list of 22 people who made me feel seen, friends from art school, colleagues who'd become confidants, clients who valued my work. Mia, my ride or die since our college days, was first on the list. I hesitated, then invited Sophie, my sister, whose quiet support over the years gave me hope she'd understand. Ethan, my brother, declined with a polite note about family obligations, which stung but didn't surprise me. Each invitation I sent, with its custom-designed logo and photos of Emerald Bay's sweeping views, felt like a reclaiming of my worth. These were my people, the ones who celebrated my sketches, not my siblings' corporate titles. The week before the retreat, I barely slept. By day, I juggled client deadlines at my studio, tweaking brand identities and approving proofs. By night, I coordinated with Lauren, who'd scored us a local chef, Sophia, for gourmet meals and a photographer to capture the week. I packed welcome baskets with California-made treasures, lavender soaps, Napa Valley wine, dark chocolate truffles, and journals I designed with the retreat's tagline, "Create your space." For Sophie's basket, I tucked in a faded Polaroid of us as kids painting on Grandpa's porch, a reminder of when we were close. Every detail was a brick in the foundation of something new, but Dad's words, "You won't be a Parker anymore," echoed in quiet moments. Was I risking too much? The day before the retreat, I drove up to Tahoe, my SUV stuffed with supplies. Pulling into Emerald Bay's circular driveway, I caught my breath. The house glowed in the afternoon sun, its sleek lines reflecting the lake like a mirror. Property manager handed me the keys, and as he left, I stood alone in the great room, the silence amplifying my nerves. I arranged the welcome baskets in each bedroom, my hands trembling slightly. What if no one came? What if this was all a desperate cry for attention? But then I pictured Grandpa Robert, his voice steady. "Your gift will take you places, Hannah." I straightened my shoulders. This was my place now. The next morning, guests arrived and the house came alive. Mia pulled up in her beat-up Volvo, her grin infectious as she took in the soaring ceilings and lake views. "Hannah, you've outdone yourself," she said, hugging me tight. Troy, a nature photographer, and his partner David arrived next, followed by colleagues and friends I hadn't seen in years. Sophie was one of the last, her face lighting up as she stepped inside. She pulled me into a hug, whispering, "I'm so proud of you. This is incredible." Her words warmed me, a flicker of family connection I hadn't felt in years. By noon, all 22 guests were settled, their laughter filling the air as Sophia prepped our first dinner in the gourmet kitchen. That evening, we gathered on the deck for sunset yoga, led by David. The lake shimmered gold, and a breeze carried the scent of pine. Over dinner, grilled local trout and heirloom tomato salad, conversations flowed from art to dreams to the startups my clients were launching. I raised a glass, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. To creativity, connection, and making our own space. Everyone cheered, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Sophie caught my eye across the table, nodding like she finally saw me. I could almost feel Grandpa and Grandma smiling down, their spirit alive in this moment. But beneath the joy, a knot of worry lingered. Dad's threat loomed like a storm cloud. Would he follow through? Would my family try to undermine this? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the laughter around me. This was my space, my retreat, my chosen family. No matter what came next, I'd fight to protect it. By the third day of the Creative Minds retreat, Emerald Bay Estate felt like a living dream. The house buzzed with creativity, pottery wheels spun on the patio, cameras clicked during Troy's photography hike, and laughter spilled from the deck where we'd shared stories over Sophia's rosemary-crusted lamb the night before. I was starting to believe I'd pulled it off, that I'd created a space where I belonged. Then the sky turned. On Tuesday afternoon, a freak storm rolled over Lake Tahoe, the kind that locals talk about for years. The air grew heavy, the lake's surface churned, and dark clouds swallowed the sun. By 3 p.m., the wind was howling, rattling the estate's massive windows. Then, with a crack like a gunshot, the power went out. Chaos erupted. Guests scrambled to secure outdoor furniture as rain lashed the deck. Lauren, ever the problem solver, grabbed flashlights from the kitchen while I ran to check the generator. That's when I heard a crash from the property's edge. A section of the wooden fence had collapsed under a fallen pine branch. My heart raced as I shouted for everyone to stay inside. We were soaked, scrambling to salvage what we could when Mia pointed toward the driveway. "Hannah, look!" I froze. Through the sheets of rain, I saw a group of figures approaching, led by my brother Nathan. Even in the dim light, I recognized his navy Patagonia jacket and the smug tilt of his head. Behind him were a few faces from our family's retreat, cousins, maybe one of Dad's colleagues. My stomach dropped. They weren't here to help. Nathan pushed through the gate, his boots squelching in the mud. "Nice setup, Hannah," he called, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's this little stunt supposed to be? Trying to one-up the family?" The group behind him snickered, their umbrellas bobbing in the storm. I felt my face burn, the wind whipping my wet hair against my cheeks. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" I demanded, stepping forward. He smirked, unfazed. "Dad sent us to check on your so-called retreat. Said you're making a fool of yourself, competing with the real thing." His words hit like a punch, echoing Dad's threat from days ago. I clenched my fists, rain dripping from my sleeves. This isn't about competition. It's about creating something for myself since you all decided I don't belong. Before Nathan could respond, Sophie appeared at my side, her face fierce despite the rain plastering her hair. "Back off, Nathan!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. "You have no right to be here. You and Mom and Dad have excluded Hannah for 3 years. 3 years of lying about no space while you invited half the city." The air seemed to still, even as the wind howled. My guests, huddled under the patio awning, watched in stunned silence. Nathan's smirk faltered, his face reddening as Sophie's words hung between us. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, but his eyes darted to the group behind him, now shifting uncomfortably. One of my cousins mumbled something and turned away. Nathan hesitated, then waved his hand dismissively. "Whatever. This is pathetic." He stormed off, his posse trailing behind, their figures fading into the rain. I stood there, soaked and shaking, not from the cold but from a fire igniting inside me. Sophie grabbed my hand, her grip steady. "I'm so sorry, Hannah," she whispered. I didn't realize how bad it was. Mia and Lauren joined us, their faces a mix of shock and admiration. "You okay?" Lauren asked. I nodded, though my heart was pounding. Nathan's intrusion wasn't just a prank, it was Dad's doing, another attempt to undermine me. But Sophie's defense, the way she called out our family's lies in front of everyone, shifted something. My guests weren't just here for yoga or gourmet meals. They were witnessing my fight to be seen. I looked at the house, its darkened windows glowing faintly with candlelight, and felt a surge of resolve. This was my space, my creation, and no one, not Nathan, not Dad, would take it away. The storm raged on, but we rallied. Troy and David helped clear the fallen branch, while Sophia improvised dinner on a gas stove. By evening, the power was back, and we gathered in the great room, warmed by a crackling fire. The mood was different now, stronger, like we'd weathered more than just a storm. But Nathan's words lingered, and I knew this wasn't over. Dad's threat to disown me, his sending Nathan to intimidate me, it all pointed to a bigger confrontation. I couldn't keep running from it. I had to face my parents, not just for me, but for the space I'd fought to create. The morning after the storm, Emerald Bay Estate felt like a sanctuary reclaimed. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over Lake Tahoe, and my guests were back in high spirits, sculpting clay with Miranda on the patio or sipping coffee on the deck. I was starting to believe I'd weathered the worst, Nathan's intrusion, the fallen fence, the power outage. But deep down, I knew the real storm was still coming. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a nagging sense that my family wasn't done trying to tear down what I'd built. On the 4th day, as I helped Sophia prep lunch in the kitchen, Lauren rushed in, her eyes wide. "Hannah, your parents are here." My heart stopped. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, took a shaky breath, and stepped outside to meet them. Thomas and Margaret Parker stood in the driveway, their Mercedes gleaming like a status symbol. Dad's face was a mask of controlled fury, his tailored blazer out of place against the estate's rustic charm. Mom, clutching her designer purse, looked more nervous than angry, her eyes darting to the house. I crossed my arms, bracing myself. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Dad didn't waste time. "Hannah, this ends now," he barked, loud enough for my guests to hear from the open windows. "You're betraying our family, throwing this ridiculous event to spite us. Stop it or you're done." His words echoed his phone call threat, but hearing them in person in front of my chosen family felt like a public execution. Guests paused their conversations, watching from the deck. My face burned, but I held my ground. "I'm not betraying anyone, Dad. You've excluded me from Tahoe for 3 years, lied about no space while inviting 118 people. I built this because you left me no choice." Dad's eyes narrowed. "You're making a scene, embarrassing me in front of my colleagues," he shouted, stepping closer. Mom nodded faintly, her silence deafening. I opened my mouth to respond, but a voice cut through the tension. "Enough, Thomas." I turned to see Beatrice, my grandmother's sister, striding toward us from the dock. At 84, she moved with the confidence of a woman who'd spent her life defying expectations as a journalist. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, and her piercing gaze locked on my parents. "Beatrice," Mom stammered. "Why aren't you at our retreat?" Beatrice waved a hand dismissively. "I refuse to go. I'm ashamed of how you've treated Hannah." The air seemed to thicken. Beatrice turned to me, her eyes softening, then faced Dad again. "You were an artist once, Thomas," she said, her voice steady but cutting. "You wanted to paint, to create, but your parents forced you into banking. You buried that dream and turned bitter, and now you're punishing Hannah for living the life you didn't have the courage to." My jaw dropped. Dad's face went pale, his hands clenching at his sides. I'd never known this about him, my father, the buttoned-up CEO and artist. Mom's eyes welled up, but she said nothing. The revelation hung between us, heavy and raw. My guests, now gathered closer, watched in stunned silence. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum. "I don't need your approval," I said, looking straight at Dad. "I've spent years trying to fit into your world, but you've made it clear I don't belong. So I built my own space with people who see me for who I am. This retreat isn't about you, it's about me." My voice didn't waver, and for the first time I felt the weight of my own words. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it, his usual commanding presence faltering. Mom let out a sob, covering her face. To my shock, Dad didn't argue. He just turned, walked back to the car, and got in. Mom followed, her shoulders slumped. As their Mercedes pulled away, the silence was broken by applause from my guests. Mia rushed over, hugging me tight. "You were incredible," she whispered. I stood there, trembling but free. Beatrice put a hand on my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be proud," she said softly. The retreat continued, stronger than ever. That night, over a candlelit dinner, my guests toasted to resilience, to creating your own path. Sophie squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. For the first time, I felt unburdened, like I'd shed the need to prove myself to my family. I wasn't just surviving their rejection, I was thriving beyond it. As the final day of the Creative Minds retreat dawned, Emerald Bay Estate glowed under a soft Tahoe sunrise. My 22 guests gathered on the deck for a closing breakfast of fresh fruit, homemade pastries, and Sophia's lavender-infused coffee. Laughter and hugs filled the air, a stark contrast to the storm, both literal and familial, that had tested us days before. The retreat had exceeded every hope I'd poured into it. Over 5 days, we'd sculpted pottery, captured the lake's beauty through Troy's photography workshops, and shared stories that forged bonds I knew would last. As guests packed their bags, they swapped contact info and made plans for future collaborations. Mia, my rock, pulled me aside. "Hannah, this wasn't just a retreat. It was a movement." Her words sank deep, and I felt a pride I hadn't known was possible. The impact rippled beyond Tahoe. Photos and videos from the retreat, posted on Instagram with #CreativeMindsRetreat, went viral in my little corner of the design world. Clients reached out with new projects, and a design magazine contacted me for a feature on building creative communities. My San Francisco studio buzzed with inquiries, proof that betting on myself had paid off. But the real transformation wasn't in my career, it was in me. The girl who'd once cried herself to sleep over her family's rejection was gone. I built a space where I belonged, surrounded by people who saw my worth. A week after the retreat, a letter arrived at my loft, handwritten on Dad's monogram stationery, a rarity from Thomas Parker, who preferred emails and boardroom directives. I opened it with trembling hands. "Hannah," it began, "I was wrong. I pushed you away because you chose a path I didn't understand, one I was too afraid to take myself. I'm sorry." The words blurred as tears welled up. He didn't promise to change overnight, but the apology, from a man who'd never admitted fault, was a start. I tucked the letter into a drawer, unsure if I was ready to respond but grateful for the crack in his armor. Another surprise came from Great Aunt Beatrice, the family rebel who'd stood by me during the confrontation. At 84, she held sway over our family's trust, and she called with news that left me speechless. "Your grandparents wanted the Tahoe property to nurture creativity, not egos," she said. "I've spoken to the trust lawyer. 1 week each summer is yours to host your retreat, as Beatrice and Robert would have wanted." I choked back a sob, picturing Grandpa's easel on the porch. Property, where I'd once felt so small, was now a canvas for my vision. Reconnecting with my family was messier. Sophie and I grew closer, meeting for coffee in San Francisco to talk as sisters, not just siblings. Nathan, shaken by his role in the storm incident, showed up at my studio one day, apologizing for not seeing my pain sooner. "I got caught up in Dad's world," he admitted. "We're not fully mended, but we're trying." Others, like Olivia and Lucas, kept their distance, defensive of our parents or unwilling to face the truth. I learned to accept that not everyone would change, and that's okay. I set boundaries, choosing to invest in those who respect me. Looking back, I see how my family's exclusion was a painful gift. It forced me to create something extraordinary, not out of spite, but from a deep belief in my own value. I no longer chase their approval. My worth lives in the retreat I built, the community I fostered, the life I've carved out in a city that hums with possibility. Standing at my loft's window, watching San Francisco's skyline twinkle, I feel free to be Hannah Parker, artist, dreamer, creator. To anyone who's felt like the outsider, here are 5 lessons I've learned. First, your worth isn't tied to others' approval. You define it. Second, rejection can be redirection. Use it to build something better. Third, create your own space. Even if it scares you, the right people will show up. Fourth, boundaries are love for yourself and others. Finally, healing doesn't mean fixing everything. It means choosing who and what deserves your energy. These lessons carried me through, and I hope they resonate with you. This story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more journeys of courage and creativity. Your support means the world, and I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever felt excluded, and how did you rise above it? This retreat was my way of turning pain into purpose, and I'm just getting started. Next year's Creative Minds retreat is already in the works, back at my grandparents' Tahoe property, and I can't wait to see what we create together. Thank you for being here. Remember, when they tell you there's no room, build a table so big they'll wish they'd saved you a seat.